A young executive sat in seat 2, a laptop open water glass half full when her hands began to tremble against the keyboard. Within seconds, she collapsed sideways across the armrest, eyes rolling back, breath catching in her throat. 40 passengers froze. A flight attendant's voice cracked over the intercom begging for a doctor. Nobody moved. Then, a quiet man from economy class walked up the aisle, holding his small son's hand, knelt beside her, pressed 2 fingers to her neck, and whispered something so soft only the boy heard it. Who was he really? The cabin lights had dimmed to that soft amber that airlines reserve for transcontinental flights, the kind of glow meant to convince people they were somewhere safer than 35,000 feet above the dark spine of the country. In seat 2, a Sophia Whitmore was working. She had not looked up from her laptop in 40 minutes. The pitch deck on her screen was the same one she had rehearsed in 3 different cities that week, and she knew it the way a pianist knows a sonata, but she still kept tightening the bullet points, still kept sharpening sentences that were already sharp. There was a glass of water sweating on her tray table untouched. There was a leather portfolio at her feet, and inside the portfolio, in a slim white envelope folded once, was a set of test results she had been carrying for 91 days without opening. Her assistant did not know about the envelope. Her board did not know about the envelope. The cardiologist who had handed it to her, a soft-voiced woman with reading glasses pushed up into her hair, had told her plainly that whatever was inside would not change the next 91 days unless she let it. Sophia had taken that to mean she was free to set it down somewhere and forget it. She had since carried it from Boston to Chicago to Denver to Seattle, where she would land in 3 hours and 20 minutes to sign a deal that would either take her company public by spring or break it apart by Christmas. She was 34 years old, the chief executive of a medical technology firm she had built from a basement office and a single contract, and she had a private rule about her own body that she had never said aloud to anyone. The rule was that if she did not look at a thing, the thing did not exist. It was not a rule she would have admitted to a therapist had she ever seen one. It was simply the shape of her life. She controlled what she ate when she slept, the angle at which she crossed her legs in board meetings, the precise tone of voice she used with men who interrupted her. She did not control the envelope, and so the envelope in her private accounting was not really there. Her mother had died in a kitchen in suburban Connecticut on a Sunday morning when Sophia was 11 years old. The official cause had been a cardiac event, which was the kind of phrase adults used when they wanted a child to stop asking questions. Sophia had been the one to find her. She had been holding a bowl of cereal. She had not eaten cereal again until she was 26. 12 rows behind her in the cheaper light of economy class, a man named Dominic Hale was folding and unfolding a piece of paper. He was 38, with the kind of forearms that suggested a job done with hands rather than keyboards, and he had not slept properly in 2 years. The paper in his fingers was a child's drawing executed that morning in green and orange crayon, and it showed 3 figures standing in a row outside a house with a triangular roof. The middle figure had a halo, which was Leo's way of indicating that the woman in the middle was no longer in the world the way the other 2 were. Underneath, in the careful block letters of a 6-year-old who had only just learned to write his own name, were the words, "Dad and Mom and me." Leo himself was asleep against his father's shoulder, mouth slightly open. One small hand curled around the edge of Dominic's sleeve, as though even in sleep, he was making sure his father did not go anywhere. Dominic looked down at him every few minutes the way a man checks that a flame has not gone out. He had been a senior emergency medical technician once attached to an air rescue unit out of a hospital in upstate New York, and he had been very good at it. He did not do that work anymore. He did contract calibration on portable defibrillators now, which paid less and required no one to depend on him for anything more serious than a charging port. He had told the recruiter at his current company that he wanted something quieter, and the recruiter had nodded the way people nodded when they had read his file and understood that quieter was a word covering a much larger silence. The 2 of them, Sophia in her amber-lit row at the front of the plane and Dominic in his rearward seat with a sleeping boy against him, did not know each other and would not have recognized each other in a crowded street. They belonged in every way that mattered to different countries. One of them still believed somewhere underneath the surface that knowledge and money and discipline could keep the worst kind of thing from happening. The other had long since stopped believing that, and had built a smaller and more honest life around the absence of that belief. There is a particular kind of person who spends a lifetime building walls around themselves, and the walls are tall and well-maintained and admired from a distance. And the person inside never quite realizes that the same walls keeping danger out are the ones muffling the sound of their own body asking for help. Sophia Whitmore was that kind of person on that night on that plane in seat 2A with a glass of water she had not drunk and a laptop screen she could not stop touching. Somewhere over western Nebraska, she felt the first thing. It was not dramatic. It was a small pressure under the breastbone, a tightening the way a belt feels when a meal has been larger than it should have been. She drank some water and waited for it to pass. It had passed before in her office in Boston twice in the last month and once in the back of a town car on the way to LaGuardia. Each time she had labeled it the same way. Stress, coffee, the recycled air of conference rooms. Each time she had been correct in the sense that the feeling had gone away and let her go back to whatever she had been doing. Each time she had also been in another sense lying to herself with a precision that only practiced people can manage. The pressure did not pass. She tried to type and her fingers struck the wrong keys. She tried again, watching her own hands the way one watches an unfamiliar animal, and saw that they were trembling. The trembling was not violent. It was the small trembling of muscles that had decided without consulting her that they would no longer take instructions. She closed the laptop with effort. She turned her head to look out the window and the cabin tilted very gently to the left, although the plane was flying level. She thought with the last clear thought she would have for some time, I should have opened the envelope. Then she tried to stand. The water glass went over before she did. It struck the carpet with a sound far too small for what was happening, and an arc of cold spread across the toe of the man in seat 2C, who looked up from his magazine with an expression of mild irritation that became within a single second something else entirely. Sophia was already pitching sideways across the armrest, her shoulder catching the edge of it, her hair falling forward across her face. A woman 3 rows back made a sound that was not quite a scream but was on the way to one. The flight attendant who reached her first was named Marie, and she had been a flight attendant for 19 years and had handled 4 cardiac incidents in the air, and she did exactly what she had been trained to do. She lowered Sophia carefully to the cabin floor in the small space between the seats. She tilted her chin up. She felt for breath against her own cheek and did not find as much of it as she wanted to find. She reached for the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, if there is a doctor or a medical professional on board, please make yourself known to the cabin crew immediately. The cabin held its breath. This is the moment on every flight where it happens that nobody talks about afterward. It is not the moment of crisis itself. It is the long second after the announcement when 40 or 60 or 200 people sit very still in their seats and look without meaning to at the people next to them, waiting for someone else to be the kind of person who knows what to do. There is a name for this in psychology textbooks. There is no name for it in the small, private shame of the person who realizes in that second that they had hoped the burden would land on someone other than themselves. The second stretched. In row 14, Dominic Hale had already lifted Leo gently off his shoulder and was settling him sideways against the empty middle seat, tucking a folded sweatshirt under his cheek. The boy stirred, opened his eyes once, and looked up at his father without surprise. "Stay right here, buddy," Dominic said very quietly. "I'll be back." Leo nodded. He did not ask where his father was going. He had seen this before in a kitchen 2 years ago, and although he had been only 4, then his body remembered it in a way that did not need words. Dominic stood up and walked forward along the narrow aisle. He did not run. Running in an airplane aisle frightens people, and frightened people get in the way. He walked the way a man walks toward a fire he has decided to put out with his shoulders set and his hands loose at his sides, and the passengers he passed turned their heads to watch him without quite knowing why. A man in a charcoal suit in row 6 caught his sleeve as he went by. "Are you a doctor?" Dominic did not answer. He reached the front of the cabin, knelt beside Sophia where she lay on the carpet, and laid the first 2 fingers of his right hand against the soft place under her jaw just below the angle where the pulse runs closest to the skin. His hand stopped there for half a second longer than it needed to. It was a very small thing. The flight attendant did not see it. The man in the charcoal suit did not see it. The woman who had almost screamed did not see it. From his seat 12 rows back with his cheek against a folded sweatshirt and his eyes just barely open, Leo Hale saw it and understood without understanding and did not look away. Then his father began to work. There is a thing that gets said about courage, usually by people who have never had to use any, that it means the absence of fear. The people who have actually walked toward the worst moment of someone else's life will tell you something different. They will tell you that the ones who step forward first are not the ones who are least afraid. They are the ones who have already learned at a price they would not wish on anyone exactly what it costs to stay seated. He worked the way someone works when they have done a thing many times and have also been ruined by it once. The first thing he asked Marie for was the aircraft's automated external defibrillator, and she told him with the steady voice of a woman who had practiced this exact answer in training without ever needing to use it that the full kit was stowed in the rear galley. The cabin had a smaller emergency bag forward, but the AED itself was 26 rows back. She was already turning to send another attendant for it. "Send 2 people," Dominic said without looking up. "One for the kit, one for the cockpit. Tell the captain we need to land. Tell him sooner is better than later." Marie went. He laid Sophia flat on her back in the narrow stretch of carpet between the first row of seats and the bulkhead, which was the only space on the airplane wide enough for what he was about to do. The man in the charcoal suit had stepped aside without being asked, his face the color of paper. 2 other passengers were standing now, one of them a woman who said in a voice that was trying very hard not to shake that she was a veterinary nurse, and could she help? And Dominic told her, yes, hold the head, keep the airway open, and if he told her to stop, she should stop immediately. He tilted Sophia's chin. He put his ear to her mouth. He counted the rise of her chest against his own ribs, and what he counted was not enough. He began compressions. The aircraft cabin is one of the worst places in the world to do CPR. The floor is too soft, the lighting is too low, the ceiling presses down on the shoulders, and the body underneath you reacts to every shift of altitude the same way yours does, only with less reserve. He counted in his head the way he had been taught a long time ago by a paramedic instructor with white hair and a habit of tapping the rhythm out on the edge of a table. 1, 2, 3, 4. The compressions had to be deep enough to actually move blood through a body that had stopped wanting to do its own work. They also had to not crack the sternum of a woman whose ribs he did not know. At the count of 15, his hands trembled. It was not a long tremor. It lasted the length of a single skipped beat, which on most days would not have mattered. The veterinary nurse holding Sophia's head did not see it. Marie, returning at a near run with the AED case, did not see it. The man in the charcoal suit, who had now retreated all the way to row 5 and was pressing the heel of his hand against his own mouth, did not see it. 12 rows back, Leo Hale saw it. He had crawled forward on his knees on the seat to look between the headrests, his small chin resting on the upholstery, and he was watching his father the way he had watched him once before on a winter morning when the coffee had still been warm in the pot. He did not cry. He had cried the first time. He had learned in the 2 years since that crying did not bring anyone back, and he had also learned that his father needed him not to fall apart at the same time. His father was trying not to. Dominic closed his eyes for the length of one compression and opened them for the next. What he said next, he did not know he was saying out loud. He did not even hear it himself. But the woman in row 3, the one who had almost screamed earlier, was leaning forward over her armrest with her hand flat against her chest, and she heard it clearly. And she would be the one who would tell the story afterward to anyone who asked. "Don't go," Dominic said very softly into the still air over Sophia's face. "Not again. Not this time." The cabin went a kind of quiet that does not happen very often in the world. It was not the silence of people who had nothing to say. It was the silence of people who had understood all at once and without being told that they had wandered into the middle of a private grief that did not belong to them. The veterinary nurse looked away. Marie's hands stopped moving over the AED case. The man in the charcoal suit turned his face all the way toward the window and kept it there. From between the headrests of row 14, Leo Hale spoke. He said it to himself mostly the way children say important things to themselves before they are sure the world will let them be true. But the woman in seat 14C heard him, and she would carry the sentence with her for the rest of her life and tell it to her own daughter years later in a different kitchen on a different winter morning. "Dad," the boy whispered, "this time you saved her." Sophia coughed. It was a small, wet, ungrateful sound, the kind of sound a body makes when it has been called back from somewhere it had not finished going to. Her eyelids fluttered. Her hand twitched against the carpet. Dominic kept the heel of his palm where it was for 2 more compressions because the protocol said to, and only then did he sit back on his heels. He did not smile. He did not exhale theatrically. He did not look up at the cabin full of people who were now staring at him as though he had pulled a coin from behind a child's ear. He bowed his head for the length of a single breath, which was the only thing he allowed himself. And then he stood up. "She'll need oxygen," he told Marie in the same flat voice he had used at the start. "Keep her on her side until landing. If she goes down again, somebody better than me will have to take over. I'm done." He turned and walked back down the aisle. There is a particular kind of person who runs toward the worst moments of other people's lives, and they are almost never the people you would expect. They are not the loudest in a meeting. They do not sit in the front row of any classroom. They are more often than not the ones who have already lost the thing they were most afraid of losing, and who have made a private and terrible peace with the fact that no amount of skill will ever guarantee a second chance. They do not move because they are brave. They move because they have learned the hard way exactly what it costs to sit still. Dominic reached row 14 and sat down. Leo climbed into his lap without a word and pressed his face against his father's collarbone. Dominic put a hand on the back of the boy's head and did not move it for a long time. Up in row 2, Sophia had been turned carefully onto her side. She was breathing. She was breathing in the shallow, tentative way of someone who had forgotten how to and was relearning it from scratch. Her eyes were open now, although they were not focusing on anything in particular, and when she tried to lift her head, she found she could not. She did manage with effort to turn her chin toward the back of the plane. She was looking, although she could not have said for whom. Marie knelt next to her with a portable oxygen mask in one hand. "There was a man," Marie said gently. "A passenger. He helped you. He's gone back to his seat." "Name." The word came out as little more than breath. "He didn't give one." The captain's voice came through the cabin announcement before Sophia could ask anything else. The plane was diverting to Denver. They would be on the ground in 22 minutes. Medical personnel would meet them at the gate. Sophia closed her eyes. When the aircraft taxied to the emergency stand at Denver International, Dominic was the 3rd person off. He carried Leo against his shoulder and a small backpack on his other arm, and he walked through the gate and across the concourse without looking back. By the time the EMTs had finished transferring Sophia onto the rolling stretcher, he was already past the security checkpoint and out of any camera worth the trouble. The hospital they took her to was a teaching facility in the northern suburbs of the city. The attending physician who came to see her at 6 o'clock the next morning was a tall woman with iron gray hair and the unhurried patience of someone who had stopped being impressed by titles a long time ago. Her name was Dr. Eleanor Reese. Sophia was sitting up in the bed by then, dressed in her own clothes, asking the nurse with controlled politeness when she could leave. She had a meeting in Seattle at 1 o'clock. She had cleared her schedule for nothing more than a courtesy follow-up. She would, she said, sign whatever waiver was required. Dr. Reese came in with a file folder under her arm and a slim white envelope in her hand. "Ms. Whitmore," the doctor said, "I want you to look at me for a moment." Sophia looked. The doctor sat down in the visitor's chair, which was not where doctors usually sat, and laid the envelope flat on the bedside table between them. The envelope was creased once down the middle. The corner had been worn soft from being pulled in and out of a leather portfolio for 91 days. "Your bag was searched for medical information when you were admitted," Dr. Reese said evenly. "Standard procedure. We found this. We also called your cardiologist in Boston. She faxed us the rest of your file an hour ago." Sophia did not look at the envelope. "You need to read it now," the doctor said. "I'll wait." What was inside the envelope was not in itself news. The diagnosis was hypertrophic cardiomyopathy hereditary form, the same condition that had stopped her mother's heart in a Connecticut kitchen on a Sunday morning 23 years earlier. The numbers on the page were specific in the way that numbers are when they have stopped being theoretical. Her ejection fraction, her wall thickness, her risk profile calculated to the second decimal. The word septal appeared 4 times. The word surgery appeared once, followed by a window of 6 weeks. Dr. Reese said when Sophia had finished reading that the episode on the airplane had not been a fluke and would not be the last unless she did something about it. She said it in a voice that had no judgment in it, which somehow made it worse. Sophia did not sign the waiver. She did not fly to Seattle. She let her chief of staff handle the deal by phone, and she lay in the hospital bed that night with the envelope on the blanket in front of her. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, she opened her laptop and began to look for the man from the airplane. She found him before sunrise. The passenger manifest gave her his name. A search of his name run through the kind of database her company used for executive background checks gave her the rest. He had been a senior emergency medical technician at St. Mary's Hospital in upstate New York, attached to the air rescue program for 9 years. He had left the service 2 years and 3 months ago. The reason for his departure was listed only as personal. The reason behind the reason took her another 20 minutes to find. His wife had been named Hannah Hale. She had been 36 years old. She had collapsed in the kitchen of their home on a winter morning with their son in the next room. The cause of death when the autopsy report became part of the public record through the wrongful death review their county had quietly conducted was a cardiac event of sudden onset. Her husband, who had been in the driveway shoveling snow when it happened, had performed CPR on her for 23 minutes before the ambulance reached the house. She had not regained consciousness. Sophia read the report twice. She read the wife's name 3 times. Then she set the laptop down on the bed beside her, looked at the envelope on the blanket, and understood with a clarity that was almost cruel that the man who had saved her life had done the same motions on the same kind of woman in a different kitchen and had failed. There are some things we avoid, not because we have not seen them, but because we have seen them too clearly. And the cost of keeping our eyes shut when it finally comes due is rarely paid by us alone. Somewhere, sooner or later, somebody else has to open theirs in our place. She did not call him. She did not know how she would have begun the call. The surgery was scheduled for the 3rd week of November, which gave her a little under 5 weeks to do everything she had been telling herself for years that she did not have time to do. Her chief of staff signed the Seattle deal on a Tuesday afternoon on Sophia's behalf, with terms slightly less favorable than Sophia would have negotiated in person, and the difference cost the company an amount that 2 weeks earlier would have kept her awake for a week. She read the email confirming the close set her phone face down on the kitchen counter of her apartment in the Back Bay and discovered that she did not feel anything about it at all. What she felt was the address she had written down on a sheet of yellow legal paper at 3 in the morning in a Denver hospital bed. The address was in a small town in upstate New York, 3 hours north of the city, and 20 minutes off the nearest interstate. She drove it herself on the 2nd Saturday of November in a rental car in a coat she had bought 10 years ago and almost never wore, and she did not allow herself to rehearse what she would say. The house was a 1-story with green shutters and a chain-link fence around a yard full of dead leaves. There was a child's bicycle leaning against the porch railing, training wheels still attached to the back. She rang the bell. Dominic Hale opened the door. He was wearing a flannel shirt over a gray t-shirt, and he had a dish towel in one hand. His face went through 3 expressions in the time it took him to recognize her. The last expression was the one that stayed. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I can't do this." Then he closed the door. He did not slam it. He did not say it unkindly. He closed it the way a man closes a door on something he has already decided he cannot afford to let inside the house. Sophia stood on the porch in her 10-year-old coat for a full minute, listening to the wind move through the dead leaves of the yard, and then she walked back to the rental car and drove the 3 hours back to the city without stopping. She came back the following Saturday. This time the boy opened the door. He was small, smaller than she had imagined from her one glimpse of him on the airplane, and he had his father's eyes and a smear of peanut butter on one cheek. He looked up at her without surprise the way Leo had looked at his father the night Dominic had stood up from his seat in row 14, and she understood that this was a child who had stopped being startled by adult arrivals a long time ago. "You're the woman from the airplane," he said. "Yes." He turned without closing the door and called over his shoulder, "Dad, the lady is back!" There was a long stretch of silence inside the house. Then Dominic appeared at the end of the hallway, drying his hands on the same dish towel, and Sophia saw him decide something he had not decided the week before. He came outside instead of inviting her in. He pulled the door almost closed behind him so that Leo could not hear, and he sat down on the top step of the porch and rested his forearms on his knees and looked out at the yard. Sophia sat down beside him. There was a foot of space between them on the step. She did not try to close it. She had thought on the drive up that she would begin by thanking him. She had thought she would explain about the envelope, about the diagnosis, about the surgery, about her mother in the kitchen in Connecticut. She had a small speech prepared. She did not give any part of it. What she said instead was, "How do you still do it after what happened?"
Let me think.
Dominic looked at his hands. "I couldn't save my
Okay,
wife,"
I think I have an answer.
he said after a while. "I worked on her for 23 minutes on a kitchen floor, and I knew at minute 4 that I wasn't going to. I kept going because stopping wasn't a thing I knew how to do yet. I had to learn how to stop afterward. That took longer than the 23 minutes. She did not interrupt him. "I can't bring her back," he said.
The woman
"I
slept
figured that out
soundly
the
in
week
bed
of the
for
funeral,
first
which I
time.
guess everybody does. What took me longer was figuring out that if I never tried again on anybody, then what happened to her would also be the thing that happened to me. And my son would grow up with a father who flinched. I decided I wasn't going to let her death do that to him." He looked at her then for the first time since she had sat down. "That's the only reason I got up on the airplane," he said. "It wasn't bravery. It was just the only thing I could do that wouldn't cost my kid more than he's already paid." Sophia did not say thank you. She understood, sitting on that porch step in November, in a coat that was too thin for the weather, that thank you would have been the smallest and least adequate thing she could have offered him. There is a kind of debt that cannot be settled with gratitude. There is only one way to repay the people who walk into the worst moments of our lives and pull us out of them, and the way is not to send a card or a fruit basket or a check. The way is to take the life they handed back to us and do something with it that makes their having bothered worth the cost. Anything less is a refund. Anything less leaves them holding the bill. She told him instead about the surgery. She told him about the envelope she had carried for 91 days. She told him about her mother. She told him about the company she had built, which made monitors for the kind of cardiac events that had killed both of those women, and which had never in 12 years of operation trained a single one of its own employees in how to use the equipment it sold. He listened without interrupting. When she had finished, he said only, "What do you want from me?" "I don't know yet," she said, "but I'll tell you when I do." She drove home that night and slept through the first uninterrupted 8 hours she had slept in a year. The surgery happened on a Thursday morning in late November, and went, in the surgeon's words, exactly the way these things were supposed to go when they were caught in time. Sophia spent 8 days in the hospital and another 6 weeks in her apartment, which she had not until then ever spent more than 2 consecutive nights in. Her chief of staff brought her decisions to sign, and she signed them, but she did not return to the office. What she did instead was begin to plan something she had not put on any agenda before. She called it the First Hands Program. It was not a glossy thing. It was not a press release. It was a mandatory hands-on, no slides allowed practical training.
All right, class,
course in
hands on the
cardiopulmonary
mannequins.
resuscitation
Begin chest compressions,
and
push
emergency
hard and
response
fast.
required of every
Good,
single
keep the
person
rhythm.
who worked at her company, from the receptionist up to the board, and offered free to anyone from the surrounding community who wanted to come. It was taught in a converted conference room with a hardwood floor on dummies that came apart when you pressed on them wrong under the kind of fluorescent lighting that made people sweat. There were no certificates of attendance. There was a written practical at the end, and you either passed it or came back the following month and took it again. She wrote to Dominic in January and asked him to be the program's senior consultant. He wrote back 2 weeks later and declined. The letter was 3 sentences long. He said he was honored. He said he could not take a formal role. He said he would, if she wanted, come down and teach the first class on its first day and bring his son with him, and after that they could see. She wrote back the same afternoon and said yes to all 3. The first class met on a Saturday morning in the second week of February. There were 42 adults in folding chairs and one 6-year-old boy at the back of the room with a sketch pad and a box of crayons. Dominic stood at the front in jeans and the same flannel shirt he had been wearing on his porch in November, and he did not introduce himself with any of his credentials. He said his name. He said that he had done this work for 9 years and that he had stopped doing it for 2, and that the difference between the 2 halves of his life was a person he had loved very much who had not made it. He said that he was telling them this because he did not want anyone in the room to leave with the idea that the techniques he was about to teach them were a guarantee of anything. He said the techniques were a chance, and that a chance was the only thing any of them ever got, and that the point of the next 4 hours was to make sure that when a chance arrived in their lives, they would not be the person who froze. Then he taught them how to do compressions on a dummy that came apart at the chest plate. Sophia stood at the back of the room in a sweater with her surgical scar still pink under the collar, and she watched him teach. And she watched Leo at the back, drawing something in green and orange crayon, and she understood in a way she had not understood before that the thing being passed from the man at the front of the room to the people in the folding chairs was not really a technique at all. It was permission. It was the simple, specific permission to be the person who walks forward when the announcement comes over the cabin. A story does not really end the night somebody is saved. The night somebody is saved is only the night the story changes hands. What matters in the long version is what the saved person does with the next year of the life they were almost done having. The ones who treat it as a refund go back to whatever they were doing before. The ones who understand what was actually given to them go and pass it on without ceremony to as many other hands as they can reach. A year later, the First Hands program had trained just over 8,000 people across 4 states. 3 of them, in 3 separate incidents that nobody had planned for, had used what they learned to keep someone breathing until professional help arrived. One of those 3 was a 9-year-old girl in a town in western Pennsylvania who had kept her mother alive on a kitchen floor for 11 minutes after a cardiac event until the paramedics came through the door. Sophia kept the white envelope from her own diagnosis in the top drawer of her desk. She did not look at it often. She did not need to. It was not a scar. It was an instruction. Dominic still lived in the same 1-story house with the green shutters. Leo was 7 now and had lost his front teeth and learned to read chapter books. And on the side of the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like a fire truck, there was a new drawing in green and orange crayon. It showed 3 figures standing in a row. The middle figure was a woman in a coat. Underneath, in slightly steadier block letters, were the words, "Dad and me," and the lady from the airplane. Not everyone is going to be a hero. The world does not actually need that many of them, and the ones it has are usually too tired to enjoy the title. But every single person on a long enough timeline is going to be standing in a room when something terrible begins to happen to someone else. The only real question at that moment is whether they are going to be the person who looks at the floor or the person who steps forward. And the strange, unfair, beautiful truth of it is that the skill which lets you step forward is not a skill you learn for yourself.